So in this room we have as Annetta just mentioned in the main room, two presentations from two of the Mental Health Promotion Innovation Fund projects. Hi, Jordan. Thanks for saying hello in chat. The first is the Innu Community Wellness Hub, and then the second being Fostering Open Expression Among Youth. The first, the Innu Community Wellness Hub from the Hauyigyatit Health Research Center, is a pre-recorded presentation. So I'll maybe check in first with Candace to see if there's a preference for when you'd like to kind of do your segment of the presentation. Otherwise, I can, that pre-recorded presentation from the QHRC project could happen either before or after. So do you have any preference, Candace? Nope, doesn't matter. Okay. Well, I'm thinking that we'll start with that one just to get that screen sharing bit out of the way before we move into kind of questions and answers. Again, Annetta gave a high-level summary of the project. The Innu Community Wellness Hub is a family-centered, community-led social enterprise model to provide evidence-based wellness programming and services for Inuit children, youth, and families in Nunavut. And that wellness hub is actually includes the construction of a physical location in Iqaluit. So if you're interested more, I mean, we'll share the video that was pre-recorded by Dr. Gwen Healy, but if you have specific questions to that project, you can either post them or ask them as part of this session, and we will collect them and either share with Gwen, or you can reach out directly to Gwen, either through the gallery walk space on the Whova platform for this event or on the KD Hub website. But if you do have specific questions about that presentation, feel free to let us know and we can facilitate that Gwen receives those. But if we're ready to go, I will load up that recording and we can have a listen. It's a bit of a PowerPoint presentation with some voiceover from Gwen. So just a moment while I get that set up.
Good afternoon. I'm going. Good afternoon. I'm Gwen Healy Aqiago. I come from Iqaluit in Nunavut, and I'm the Executive and Scientific Director of the Hauyigyatit Health Research Center in Iqaluit. And I'm currently a Fulbright Canada Research Chair in Arctic Studies at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, which is why I'm not able to join right now. As I'm away in the US with a different schedule than I'm used to. What I'm going to share today is a bit about our story to create Innu Silvik, which is a place to be well. I'll just provide a little bit more introduction to myself and our context in the Arctic before I dive into the story of what we're doing and what we hope to accomplish. I was born and raised in Iqaluit, that's my home. I'm formally trained as an epidemiologist and public health researcher. What we say at home is I'm heart trained by Iqalummut, by the people of Iqaluit who have trained me to operate, I guess, the way I do by a set of values that are important to our community. And in our work, we see ourselves as being in service to our community as well. I've worked in circumpolar health and health in the north for over 20 years now, and I co-founded our center in 2000. I think in the Arctic, well, first of all, this is how we see ourselves. This is our view of the world, where we see ourselves among other Arctic communities. And what we often face as people in the Arctic is a narrative that talks about uh, our environment and the lands and waters around our communities as if nobody lives there. And these two maps, one is a map of Polinia's and another of the Arctic region geographically. In neither of these maps are communities or any real connection to people portrayed. And this is not uncommon in discussions and narratives about the Arctic. This is something we do see frequently. And this is one of the better maps that's out there of our beautiful circumpolar region, where all the communities are named in the mother tongue of the people who live in those regions all around the Arctic in the 8 circumpolar countries. And so this is a Canadian map. We like to see ourselves and our communities on this map, on this visual. And in Canada, people often talk about our Arctic as if it's empty. I think even within the last 10 years, you know, the Globe and Mail did a 2-page spread, you know, on the front of the newspaper about how Canada's north is the last frontier. But of course, what we know to be true is that the lands of Canada's Arctic are very, very occupied. And this map tells a story about where our community members go and travel. This map was created out of a project from the Scott Polar Research Institute at Cambridge University. It's available if you want to explore more on paninuittrails.org. But to create this map, the researchers gave hunters and harvesters GPS units and then documented where everybody was going. And as you can see, these lines mark sea ice, our sea ice superhighways, boat travel, overland travel. These are the lines that connect our communities to each other, that connect people to places of importance, to harvesting areas, to collective memory and naming places of significance, as well as family and kinship ties. So through this map, we see so much more than just a geography that looks barren to the outside world. It is full of love and relationships, connections, food sources. So much is represented here that people don't often get to see. Qawigartit is located in Khaluit, and so you can see on the map where we are. And there are similar institutes in the Northwest Territories and the Yukon with whom we have collaborated in the past and continue to. Qawigartit is independent. That's been really important for our institution. Over time, we are unaffiliated with any post-secondary institution in Canada. We're an independent research center, and that's been part of the spirit of self-determination of our communities as well. We work on the health priorities brought to us by Nunavummiut, by the people of Nunavut, and we are Nunavummiut, working to advance the health of our communities. And our institute really grew out of a climate of researchers coming in and studying what was of interest to them and then leaving again and not having access to information or data. And the need for our communities really to drive research in the direction where we need information and in a way that we can use it for change. And Qawigartit means looking for knowledge, and it was the name given to our institute by the late Andrew Tarak Sr., who was our founding chair. Right now, Qawigartit is currently staffed entirely by women, and we also have our entire board is women, and just by chance, really dynamic group of people. We work to implement research studies and develop programs in a safe and supportive environment that is responsive to our cultural context and is highly ethical. And we work to promote Inuit ways of knowing and doing, ultimately to improve the health of Nunavut. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the hub, the Inusilvik Community Wellness Hub. This is also in the same way that Kauyigelti grew out of a climate of research and knowledge, not serving Nunavummiut. Inusilvik has also grown out of a climate of service provision that has not always aligned with what our communities need, and how we are trying to find innovative ways to address that, and of course serve families in the way that they need. And so our challenges have been, really a fragmented service delivery model that has been inherited from other governments of the past, before the creation of the territory, and before that, through times federal services and then territorial services, and so on and so forth. And there are a number of gaps in those services. Often not-for-profit organizations are filling in those gaps. So we like to say in Nunavut, like our not-for-profit sector tends to be our innovation sector, certainly in terms of what we're doing, but across the board, where nonprofits can be more nimble, can be more proactive in providing services and developing programs that families need, and not-for-profit organizations also tend to be more oriented toward delivering programs that are community-based and community-led. And because of that, they are, have difficulty obtaining adequate funding and sustainable funding. And another part of the challenge has been that we're vulnerable, I think, to a dominant narrative that talks about northern and rural and remote communities in a deficit-based way. So what people often see or think or know about us is really all of the terrible things that um, that happen. And so in this photo of the tundra, it looks gray and rocky and desolate, but there are all these beautiful, delicious little cranberries that are spread over the land, in the fall season. And you have to know where you're stepping, and you have to know where to look. But if you're not looking, you won't see it. And so one of our biggest challenges is that sometimes our systems are blind to these little blossoms. And so our strengths are, of course, Inuit values and cultural literacy and knowledge that is our wealth in Nunavut. The ties to the land and programs that elevate that holistic relationship to the land and the animals, health promoting practices that are embedded in the Inuit way of life. As I said, our strengths are really that we are nimble and responsive, even though we're underfunded, and sometimes just doing work for free because we can see where the needs are, and the funding doesn't move fast enough to support those responses. We just do it anyway. We're very much focused on community, and we have a small population. And so people often say that we have so few people, it's hard to do anything, but we would say the opposite, that we have so few people, we really should be able to do absolutely anything. Like our population is 35,000 people, 35 to 40,000 people, depending on if you're counting sort of the transient population or not. But really, like, we have every opportunity to be innovative for our communities. One of the other challenges has been space. Like, we're often competing for a school gym or a church hall or just somewhere to deliver programming. And so we wanted a really accessible space, somewhere that will support children and families, and where we can test out, a service delivery model that reflects our strengths. And so in the phase one part of the project, we really focused on partnership development with other not-for-profits and piloting a small scale of the model in our little office, to try and elevate evidence-based community programs, in a way that improved accessibility and gave them a little more sustainability in terms of having a space and things like that. And we have had tremendous support from both the territorial government and different actors in the federal government for what we're trying to do here. So in the model for this project, we want to look at how we develop this integrated holistic service delivery model, and like what it's going to look like in terms of taking action in our community. We want to document all the partnerships that are required for a service delivery model and evaluate it, because the idea is we want to see this replicated throughout our health system and our the health and well-being spaces in our territory. And then of course we want to do that through Inuit methodologies. So then for phase two, we are really focused on implementation and expansion into all of the different types of services that would come under the umbrella of an Inuit holistic model. We have been mapping out what an Inuit holistic service delivery model looks like based on what we've all been talking about all this time. And so that looks like ways in which we support families. In the center of the model is a heart and all of these different skills and knowledge and practices that we want to see elevated in our community, and that this is done through love and what we call a heart-centered space. And so one of the things our elders say is that our school system, for example, teaches children to their minds, and the Inuit skill development processes teach children to their hearts, and that Inuit ways of knowing and being are based on the heart, of being kind and compassionate, of strong moral grounding, and from there, from the base of foundation of strong relationships, and with family or community or whatever, in whichever way an individual can contribute to a child or a person's growth and development, that is a relational space that is at the heart of everyone's learning. And so that's the basis for the model. And then from there, that leads to, the supports for families, intergenerational learning, Inuit counseling services, land-based programs, and ensuring that that relationship is nurtured, cultural and well-being literacy programs, early childhood education, like all of it comes together in this beautiful way, in this beautiful space, elevating knowledge and making observations and constantly readjusting our progress forward along the path, to achieving well-being throughout the life spectrum. And so our goals, of course, are to, one, operate a community space with this model. That would be the most innovative and exciting thing to happen, I think, ever for our territory. We want to support other nonprofits who are doing similar community serving work. And of course, we're doing this within a trauma-informed approach that's based on holistic Inuit wellness philosophy, which includes, collective knowledge and collective learning and collective healing and collective well-being. We anticipate that such a model would improve access to early childhood programming, of course, and all of these services. It would be a less fragmented, secure and safe space that families can rely on for accessing a number of programs and services, that will have a stronger community-based, professional training and post-secondary training center, that elevates cultural learning as part of that, embedded in that, and then also this improved collaboration among nonprofits. So this asset-based community development theory, where we're all working together to elevate our assets and pool them to, basically leverage that into stronger collaborations for the well-being um, of our community. And so then the anticipated map is sort of, for us, like our willow trees crawl along the ground because of the permafrost on the, in the Arctic, and so this is what our willow branches look like when they spread out along the ground. And so the outcomes map is based on the concept of a willow, which is growing over time. And we anticipate seeing changes at the individual level for individual skill development and confidence, self-esteem, health literacy, etc. We anticipate seeing community level outcomes around collaboration and participation and social support, dedicated community spaces, and different partner level outcomes around communication and evaluation and, uh, interdisciplinary development, like program development. Like there's just so much possibility that's going to come from this. And then figuring out how we sustain it over time. And it should lead to greater sustainability of nonprofits through co-location. And so one of the last pieces I wanted to talk about is really actually also health architecture. So we through the funding from the Public Health Agency, we're exploring this whole service delivery model. It'll be new and innovative for our part of the world. But we've also been successful in leveraging actual infrastructure dollars to actually build a building to do all of this. And so we've put an extraordinary amount of care into how this building is going to be constructed and how it's going to reflect Inuit architecture for one, but also how our communities use space. And so anyhow, this is the top and bottom floors, and in the center you can see there's a circle, and that's actually leads up to a skylight that comes down through the whole center of the building through both floors, and that lets in light similar to a way in the way people used to build igloos, or still build them, but also used to build them, and would use ice to make windows, in an igloo, and light would come in through the top. That is meant to be reflected here in the architecture of the space. And so this area on the ground floor that's circular, we call it the drum space, and it will have nice acoustics, but it's also a big welcoming area for people to sit, and then the doors leading off into the different spaces in the building for families to access. And this is a little preview of what the preschool, the early childhood education center will look like, and with all of the beautiful colors and all of the beautiful children, and their playground outside behind the building, which of course will be snow and ice friendly, and this is the street view now of the proposed. So the exciting thing is that this building is actually under construction right now, and I'm just going to show you a little clip of our progress through the fall up to the Christmas holiday. And so through the pilot phase of this project, we delivered training courses in our Inuit-focused programs for youth camps and child rearing programs to more than 50 frontline workers. We implemented a mentorship program for Inuit leaders to bring Inuit-led health and wellness interventions into their workplaces. We hosted workshops on communication for nonprofits to elevate Inuit-focused health promotion materials in English and Inuktitut. We hosted 6 mentorships for Inuit women in leadership. We had a drop-in yoga program for the community and provided dedicated space for an elder counselor on evenings and weekends when the COVID protocols would allow. We also had meetings between community workers and elders to learn more about their perspectives on supporting families through this holistic service delivery model. And most importantly, we provided a dedicated space for nurturing those multilateral partnerships between Inuit organizations and the territorial government and the federal government. Providing a neutral space for problem solving and advancing the interests of Nunavummiut. And so with that, that concludes my presentation. I just want to say, Kuyanamig, Nakumig, thank you so much for listening. And we're always sharing updates on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And if you ever want to follow along what we're doing or reach out, we have a really fun and active group of our team on social media. And my email address is there if anybody wants to reach out with any questions. And thank you so much for your time. And I wish everyone a really beautiful day and a good time at the symposium.
All right, and thanks again to Gwen for preparing that for us. As she mentioned, if you have any questions about what was presented, please feel free to reach out to her. I'm happy to pass along her email address, or you can reach out to the KD Hub, and we're more than happy to facilitate a connection there as well. Excellent. I really enjoyed that time lapse of the construction. It's really cool to see. Yeah, see that going up. It's really neat. So with that, we'll move over to the second presentation before we get to some questions. And yes, Jordan, I can share that Instagram for you in just a moment. So I'll pass it over to Candice Lease with the Foxy Mental Health Intervention Project.
Sorry, folks. I'm just trying to figure out how to share my screen here.
No problem.
Okay. Awesome. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, looks great. Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, thanks to Gwen for that presentation. I've actually known Gwen for many years. We did our PhDs with the same supervisor, so we've been colleagues for several years, and I'm disappointed she's not here because she's such a great storyteller. So my name is Candice Luss, and I'm a Métis woman from Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. And I've been living in Yellowknife for about the last 14 years or so on the traditional territories of the Yellowknives, Dene, and the North Slave Métis Alliance. So I hold a PhD in public health science, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Foxy and Smash. And I'm also the first Ashoka Fellow from the Northwest Territories. And for those who don't know, Ashoka is a social innovation and entrepreneurship organization that supports a network of 3,500 fellows across 92 countries. They do some really interesting work with social entrepreneurship and innovation. So to give you a bit of a context for the North, Gwen gave you a great one about the Inuit context. So Foxy operates in the three territories, so the Yukon, Nunavut, and Northwest Territories. We're based in Yellowknife and have our greatest spread through the Northwest Territories, but also through most of the communities in Yukon and Nunavut as well. And to give you an idea of the scale of the Northern context, the Northwest Territories alone has a population of about 41,000 across 1.3 million square kilometers, which is about 20% greater than the size of Ontario. So we have a massive land space. And as Gwen mentioned, we have many different connections through communities that aren't necessarily through things like road systems or year-round road systems. We have many ice roads up here if you've ever seen ice road truckers. Half of our population in the NWT are Indigenous, so First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, as are about 85% of folks in Nunavut and 25% of the Yukon. And the North has one of the youngest populations in Canada. I'm not going to go deep into the Northern context. As Gwen mentioned, so often conversations about the North are really deficit-based. But one of the things we really focus on in Foxy and Smash is recognizing the historical context that so many of our young folks come from, and that the legacy of residential schools in the North is still very, very real. And the social and health disparities in the North really impact people's access to things like healthcare and the ability to be healthy and to build healthy relationships. And recognizing all these, in the past, there's been a scarcity of like culturally age and gender appropriate interventions for young folks. So that's kind of the niche where Foxy and Smash came into. So we offer two programs. The first is Foxy, which stands for Fostering Open Expression Among Youth. It began in 2012 as part of my PhD project, actually. And it was developed by and for Northerners with a lot of development working with young folks. And 12 years ago, I was also much younger, so I would have considered myself a youth back then. So we've grown into an incorporated nonprofit organization. We focus on health promotion, healing from trauma, developing leadership capacity. And so far we've reached over 8,000 Indigenous and Northern youth of all genders in more than 35 communities in the NWT, Yukon and Nunavut, and trained over 600 peer leaders in comprehensive sexual and mental health education. So I just put a bunch of pictures in here to tell you kind of the stories of some of the things we do. We do a lot of messy art. It's one of the things we love to do the most. So the ultimate goal of Foxy and Smash is a stronger connection with self, with others, and with community. So in a lot of ways, it really ties in with the work that Gwen does. Really building that community-centered approach to sexual and mental health education. So we offer 9-day on-the-land peer leader retreats. So far, they've been held at Blatchford Lake Lodge, which is about a 20-minute float plane or ski plane ride from Yellowknife. And we train young folks there to be peer leaders and to co-facilitate all of our programming with adult mentors, which are also guided by Northern elders. So they develop community projects when they're at their retreat, and then they go home and they execute the community projects when they're home with the help of Foxy and Smash staff. So our programming uses an arts-based approach to reach youth and address sexual and mental health. We also focus on like trauma, sexuality, healthy relationships, resiliency, and we work to teach coping skills and engage inner resiliency from our participants. So we use all kinds of arts, everything from drama, photography, storytelling, traditional drumming, beading, Inuit and Dene games, painting, music, dance, yoga, brattle making, visual art of body making. Basically, any art that you can think of, we're trying it out there and seeing what works with young folks. The arts are really accessible. That's why we use them. We can engage with them without considering yourself an artist. I don't consider myself an artist, but I can get behind the art that Foxy does. They allow for the incorporation of cultural features while mitigating barriers of lower literacy that can be common among some folks. The arts are really, we use them as a way to enable conversations about like sensitive or taboo topics, especially to do with like sexual or mental health. Yeah, we have a lot of really great conversations while folks are completing art projects. That's a participant who's sewing a rattle, I believe. And they're taking all kinds of pictures and processing their pictures, and then creating galleries of art with the photos they make. And there's some smudging that happens and creating rattles. And then we do a lot of like ceremony with the rattles as well. So we also have Strength, Masculinities, and Sexual Health is the other program that we do. This is, it was developed in 2016 when we earned the Arctic Inspiration Prize. So we did extensive community and youth consultation. We did interviews and focus groups and sharing circles with over 200 young people, community leaders, educators, social workers, healthcare providers, everyone you can think of who wanted to talk with us. We took input from them on what SMASH should look like. And we held a 2-day think tank with a bunch of folks as well who helped us to do everything from design what SMASH should focus on to the name to everything to do with SMASH. So SMASH is an interactive and strengths-based culturally and contextually grounded intervention. And it's something that we have for young men, because I think there's not a lot of programming that focuses on young men. There's many programs for young women, I think, and non-binary youth. But young men, I think the beauty of the space that SMASH creates is it's a space where they can have conversations where they just don't have anywhere else to have those conversations, that I think perhaps young women and non-binary youth have more opportunities for those conversations, at least around here. So that's some folks doing some Inuit and Dene games out at the SMASH retreat. And I think they're sewing moose hide balls. Our elder had them sewing some balls to play some games. And just playing some more games out there. Sorry, I lost my track here. So Foxy and SMASH participants are supported to plan a community project that's delivered when they return to their home communities. So they receive 2 high school credits for their active participation in the peer leader retreat, and then another 2 credits for completing their community projects. Our leadership model also encourages many youth to support our on the land programming as apprentices and facilitators. So folks who go through our programming and become peer leaders then have the opportunity to come back and become staff members and do additional support at our retreats. Many youth also becomes peer facilitators on our staff, and all of our programming is co-facilitated with young people. So being peer facilitators on staff gives them another 5 credits. So by participating with Foxy and SMASH, they can actually earn 10% of the credits that they need to graduate high school just by being part of our programming. So we're a research and evaluation focused organization. We really believe that evaluation is critical to showing impact and ensuring that we remain relevant and useful and that we can get funding, the nonprofit struggle. We engage in both quantitative and qualitative research using Indigenous and participatory methodologies such as two-eyed seeing and community-based research. We have lots of different outcomes of our research that I'm happy to, I think that are already published in the work the KDE Hub does. Sorry, accidentally moved off that. For instance, like Foxy participants demonstrate increases in like STI knowledge, safer sex, self-efficacy, resilience, those kinds of things. And we see similar results in SMASH participants as well. Everything from increasing knowledge, developing leadership skills and capacity, communication skills, the feelings of connection with Indigenous cultures and histories, personal growth, and in SMASH we also see a lot of youth telling us about how they feel like they've redefined notions of masculinity that they had before our programming and challenging traditional norms of things like strength, emotional openness, empathy, attitudes towards mistakes, and healthy relationships. So that's what we do at Foxy and SMASH. I'm happy to answer more questions. about anything we do. We have a pretty active presence on Instagram and Facebook, if you're interested in checking us out there, and I'm happy to answer more questions.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Candace. And we do have some time for some questions. Absolutely. While the participants are thinking of those, I did want to ask one question about it looked like the SMASH program also takes place at the Blatchford Lake Lodge. Is that correct? I know you have had intentions to go to other locations. I guess I was wondering if you might be willing to speak to those different locations and whether the specific location has an effect on the programming. If it changes, but like if you had another location, would that be different from the Blatchford Lake Lodge, for example? I'm just curious about that.
So one of the things that works really well with us doing our programming out at Blatchford is that it's a location that isn't accessible by cell phones. And that really changes the vibe and of the programming that we do out there. So any programming that we would do, we seek to find a place that isn't easily accessible by things like cell phones or roads, which is a challenge actually in the north that the pandemic has really highlighted. So we did have a second location lined up to do this spring, and then the community flooded in this spring, so we haven't been able to use that location. In April this year, though, we are doing our first winter retreat out at Blatchford. So it's still the same location, but it's going to be quite different in that way. So we'll try it out and see how winter works. But I think whenever you can do programming where you're truly disconnected from the outside world, but still have, still able to reach the outside world if you need it. I just think that adds so many more elements. And it also teaches young people, one of the things they're most proud of when they come out of our programming actually is a lot of them say, I never thought I could go 7 days without my cell phone. And it's a really reinforcing behavior for us all, participants and staff members, to know that we can all survive 7 days without our cell phone.
Yeah, I think we could all benefit from unplugging, disconnecting for a certain amount of time every once in a while. Yeah, that's really neat. I can imagine the activities being quite different in the winter for sure. So interested to hear how that goes. I wanted to open it up to the people here connected in this breakout room. Shannon, thanks for raising your hand.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Candace, for this great overview. I also really enjoyed the pictures you put together. It was great to kind of hear your story along with the wonderful photos. I'm interested, I don't know if you have any examples, but thought it's a really great process, like to bring people together for the land-based programming and then have them develop and create ideas for their own community. And I wonder if you had some examples of the projects that the youth have developed, or maybe the kind of themes you're seeing and the issues that they see in their communities and they want to address when they get back. And I'm really just interested too in that role that youth can play, like as a leader in their community. So yeah, this is really fabulous to just hear about the process that you go through to empower this kind of youth leadership.
Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, so the community projects, the idea behind the community projects is not so much the outcome of them as it is reinforcing the idea that everybody can be a change maker. So we try to provide kind of a spectrum of different ways to be leaders within the community projects. So everything from, for some youth, for them completing a community project, going and shoveling snow for their elders is something that is a stretch for what they feel like they can do as a leader, and it helps them to do something that's a little bit daring, and to complete a project and to have that reinforcement that they know that they can be a leader in their community in that way. So it can be everything from like shoveling snow. We've had youth who've started letter writing campaigns to their MLAs about mental health and addictions treatment in the Northwest Territories. We've had other youth do like a baking program at the Arctic Indigenous Wellness Foundation here with some of their adult folks there. We've had some youth organize in some of their schools. They didn't have recycling, so they started a recycling program because they felt that was really important. So it can be a range, and we try to go with whatever they're interested in, and to encourage them to do something that they can complete, to get that reinforcement, to know that they can be leaders within their community. So all kinds of different projects we've had. We've had others doing like toiletry drives for some of our folks who are experiencing homelessness. And yeah, there's all kinds of projects.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Like, this is amazing, right? Because that's such a big piece of our own, everyone's wellness is giving, right? And a lot of those sound like, you know, those in-service kind of community projects, along with some of it, some bigger pieces that they see they need, like contacting political leadership for change, right? So yeah, great. Yeah, that's that. I think I just really, I didn't quite know this part of your program, so it's really great to learn more. Thank you.
Yeah, the community projects are great for young people really realizing their own connections within their community. So yeah, it's not so much about what the actual project is, but the reinforcement of your place within community.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions from the participants here?
I'll ask another question if there aren't any others. I know I'm interested too in your land-based approach to the programming. And I know you said it was 9 days. And I'm wondering if you could maybe just expand a bit on what happens in 9 days, or are they in one place? Do they move around? Is there, I understand too, of course, you're going to be doing different ones. You mentioned a winter camp too. So yeah, I'm happy to hear any more information if you have it with you. Yeah.
So our 9-day program, we've got it kind of down to a T. We've done about 25 different retreats before. So basically we all fly out to Blatchford Lake Lodge, and then the structure that we kind of find works best is to kind of have like 3 rotating workshops in a day. And the workshops are different arts. So they might be something like Inuit and Dene games in another one. There might be another one where you do watercolors and you collect materials from the land outside to create your paints. There might be one where we do like creating digital stories, and we go off on a hike and make some stories about sexual health and mental health. So they do these 3 kind of rotating workshops. And then in the evenings, we often have like time to connect with elders. Our elder, sews like moose hide balls or sealskin balls or whatever animals we have. They play Inuit and Dene games. They go swimming. The release with water is really important. We do a lot of Indigenous ceremonies when we're out there, drum circles and ceremonies. We sing particular songs, and swimming is a really key part of what we do when we're out there, because that cleansing is really important. Cleansing with water after ceremony. So I'll be interested to see how the winter ones go, because we'll probably still be doing some of our ceremonies out there. Maybe we'll have to go and play out in the snow. It'll be April, so things will be melting and stuff too. So, but yeah, we go through it's kind of a pretty packed schedule. It's hard, but it's a challenge, but it's something we've figured out over the years, building in that downtime too for processing, and for space for youth to go off and speak with a mental health provider if that's something that they find helpful, or sometimes they go off with the elder and do their own ceremony and connect with the land. And it's a really dynamic space, and there's a lot of moving parts. So as much as I can tell you what the schedule is supposed to look like, it also changes all the time, depending on what the needs are. So I think one of the biggest challenges of doing land-based programming is always being able to pivot quickly and to just roll with it, because you really never know what you're going to get until you're really into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure it's a really powerful and enriching experience for all the youth. And I also like the mention that you encourage, if they go through the program, they can come back and work for you, right? Or stay connected in some ways, because I'm sure that's really nice to see through. Oh, I see another hand raised. So
Yeah, over to you, Megan.
Thanks. And thank you, Candace. Sorry, my camera's off. My internet connection's not very good today. So I hope that you can hear me okay. I really appreciated what you were sharing about the ways in which you approach research and evaluation, and understand that you kind of draw guidance from two-eyed seeing. And I think you referenced community-based research methods. Are there specific tools or approaches that you would be willing to give some more detail on, or are there resources that are perhaps available that you share with other projects that you have found worked really well with young people?
So we use a bunch of, so we do a survey, and we've over the years figured out kind of which scales actually work for us. I believe that information is in the KD Hub information. Otherwise I can share which particular scales we use. For us, the sharing circles are really an important method for collecting data, and that work really well for us. So we try to incorporate the arts into our sharing circles, and ceremony as well. They're usually done like in a ceremonial space. So they're not really traditional focus groups. They're a little bit more of the sharing circle style for us at least.
Okay, thank you. That's really interesting.
Yeah, we can certainly share, if that's okay, with permission, Candace, with Megan, and we'll let you know and possibly make that connection, after the symposium if there's any missing pieces from what we have, Candace. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I should also mention we do 6-month follow-ups with all of our participants, as well as their parents and guardians too. So there's opportunity there for them to share like what it looks like 6 months later for participants. We do both surveys then, as well as interviews with participants and their guardians.
Thanks so much for sharing all of that.
Wonderful. And there's a question in chat as well from Anais. I would love to hear how various forms of gender-based violence come up in the retreats and discussions, if that's an issue for the participants, or if it's not so central or top of mind.
So gender-based violence, it comes up all the time in so many areas, all the time of what we do. One of the things we found really interesting and that we're moving towards is concepts of gender-based violence among the youth that we've worked with. We're finding that gender-based violence tends to be more narrowly defined, I guess. So it seems to be something that people see as like intimate partner violence or violence within a home, and very physical. And one of the things we're working on now is developing programming that focuses on other forms of gender-based violence on the spectrum. So like some of the big, like we've always talked about like the patriarchy and stuff at the things we do, but really focusing on violence that looks at other forms of gender-based violence as well. So it's kind of like a work in progress for us, is something that we've identified as a need through the research that we've been doing.
Thanks for responding to that one. Continue to place any questions you have in chat for those of you connected. I do want to ask, we have about just under 10 minutes left in this breakout room before we go back to the main room. I did want to comment on a couple, just to kind of maybe make a link between Gwen's presentation and Candace's. for Foxy, just some of the concepts that Gwen mentioned as part of their work. I'm just curious if they sort of, to what extent they resonate for you, Candace. Things like heart-centered space, or elevating knowledge for that holistic delivery service, or health architecture. Like, to what extent do those kind of either resonate or play into the programming or the activities that you do in your work?
I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap or like similar but slightly different understandings of these things. I think both of our approaches are very holistic, very focused on community and on family, however you define family. Like at our retreats, we strive to bring in folks from across the medicine wheel, which the medicine wheel isn't an Inuit focused concept. They have their own understanding under IQ knowledge, but I mean, the elders say that if we don't, that like a gathering isn't complete until we have all aspects of the medicine wheel there. So we have everyone from babies to young people to adults to elders at every gathering we do. My kids come to everything, which is, I mean, it's very common in programming, especially I think in the North, for people to bring their kids and for babies to be part of every meeting that we do.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned, here's a question that comes in. Sorry, never mind. Just about the elder knowledge as well. I mean, you sort of touched on it here just then, and also as part of the actual programming. I guess I'm just wondering if you wanted to comment on that knowledge, that pool of knowledge that is incorporated within your project.
I mean, we're so fortunate to have the elders involved that we do. They really, we couldn't do this work without them. They just bring so much, especially to our retreats. We've been working for years with Elder Jane Dragon, who we call Setsune, which means grandmother. And she's just the rock of our organization. So we've been really fortunate. And I think one of the things I appreciate most about our elders is they provide knowledge and wisdom in a very kind way, but also firm at sometimes. So I think working with young folks, sometimes the only when you're having a bit of a power struggle with a younger person, sometimes I think having the elders there to be able to say, all right, get up and move. I think it's really important in the programming we do to have those voices there, because I think there's a lot of respect for our elders up here in the North.
Amazing. Sure. Katie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear about, I saw your images of doing body mapping with youth, and I am very interested in body mapping. I did it as a methodology for my dissertation, looking at weight-based stigma. So with folks who identify anywhere along the spectrum of fat, everyone uses different words. I myself, referring to myself, use the word fat. And it was just such like an amazing community, like not, and using community not in the buzzword kind of way, but like really deep connection kind of way. I mean, that was in 2019, and I'm still connected with the folks who took part in that, and now call many of them, dear friends, and I didn't know them before we did that. And I was the researcher, and they were my participants. So I'm just so interested to hear about like how that went for you, because what I know about body mapping is, in all arts-based research, is it's so different from one context to another, one question to another, one community, like who's in the room and what bodies are represented, and what materials, right, are represented, whether it's focused on paint or collage or with body mapping. So just so interested to hear whatever you'd like to share about what that process was like.
So body mapping, actually body mapping formed a good portion of my dissertation as well when I did my PhD research. Body mapping, I mean, we've been doing it since 2012, right? Since the beginning. And it's evolved for us over time. We often now use personality mapping instead, because of some of the issues that some of our participants have with the concept of laying down on a map and having your body traced. For some people, it's just not comfortable. So we started moving towards personality mapping and allowing them to create a body of something. It doesn't necessarily need to look like a person. It doesn't need to look like them as a person. But over time, really figuring out ways to build in flexibility and adaptability to body mapping that makes it, I think, a bit more relevant and palatable for some folks than what I was doing 10 years ago. So I guess it's like an evolving process that's changed over time for us.
That's so helpful. Thank you. And just the the ways we have to adapt in real time as well with any arts-based research, even asking participants with body mapping to trace one another, right? That's a very hard thing to do in a trauma-informed way in real time. And from an accessibility perspective, like one of my participants couldn't lay down on the various surfaces that I had available. And so it was really beautiful, actually. We created a situation where we could hang the paper on the wall, and our paper was quite wide because I'm working with fat folks. And my goal was to have, well, not my goal. I wouldn't do this unless everyone who came into the space could definitely outline themselves. Like the paper had to be wider than you would maybe normally have. And so we put hers up on the wall and used a projector, and then she stood in front of it. And so and then someone traced the silhouette, and she was able to change how close she was to it to get it as true to like her size in the physical world. And she actually made two outlines of her profile facing each other standing. And so it ended up being this really gorgeous map that was complete group brainstorming and adaptability and flexibility, and different people helped at different times. I had the projector there just in case, but didn't know if anyone would use it, and then was so glad that I did, because that map was so gorgeous and the process became so much more accessible. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And I mean, in a different space, I'd love to hear more about personality mapping. And yeah, I tried to adapt it once to space mapping to talk about physical space and with youth, queer and trans youth, and it was it was a complete fail. It didn't work. They didn't like it. They didn't connect with it, and so we shifted gears and just did like a focus group. But yeah, that adaptability of arts-based stuff is just so interesting to me.
Yeah, you got to roll with it sometimes, because we've done a lot of things that were just utter fails, and you just have to pivot and keep going and figure out what works. So I think one of the things that Foxy and Smash does really well is listening to the young folks. And when they tell us something sucks, we just do something else, because I mean, that's what we got to do, right? So I love
you can't have an ego.
No.
They'll tell you.
You can't be attached to anything. You just have to roll with it.
That's great. Maybe just one more quick question before we close out, the countdown will start any second here, I'm sure. But I just wanted to ask about youth engagement. You mentioned high school credits, for example. It's one way to entice people to become interested in the project and into the retreat to get something out of it that's pretty tangible. Are there any other kind of ways that, to what extent are youth just,
all of our programming is really oversubscribed. I wish we had more money, more time, more capacity to be able to do a lot more, because we've been really fortunate that that they really like what we do, and that they keep coming back, and that they want to come back in different roles as well.
Yeah,
it's been really great. So
that's great. Thanks so much for that quick last one. Yeah, the breakout rooms are closing here in 20 seconds. Thank you so much, Candace, for being here. Next time we'll try and get Gwen here as well too, so that we can have some questions for her live as well. But it was so great to hear from you and for you to comment on some of what was in her presentation as well. So I appreciate your presence, and we'll see you back in the main room shortly.